Thank you, David. April and I are delighted to be with you this afternoon just to share some learnings, just to share the journey that we've been on in the last 4 years, and just to share with you some of the evolution that's gone on in terms of our strategy around how we are managing those conflict situations in the organisation. I lead the HR advice and guidance team across the organisation. I'll talk a little bit about actually what that entails. And April leads one of my teams, but what I'll do is just give you some of the organisational context, where we've come from, where we are now, and then I'll hand over to April just to share some of the detail. April's really been in the driving seat of the journey that we've been on in the last 4 years. So we'll just share some of that with you. And we'll frame it, I guess, just to give you that organisational context, just to give you a little bit about why issue resolution, what led us to the relationship that we've been able to develop with David and his team, what we've done, what we learnt, what we're still planning to do, how we're continuing to evolve, and some of the challenges that we think we still want to really face into organisationally. We've done a lot, we've still an awful lot to do, I guess is the key point from that. So, just a little bit, very quickly, about Lloyd's Banking Group. You know, what we all know all too well what happened late 2008, 2009. The banking crisis brought two of the UK's top 5 banks together. That was Lloyd's, that was Halifax and Boss, HBOS as was at the time. Both businesses were 70-odd thousand employees strong in their own right at the time. Both played to some similar and some quite different customer segments in the UK and internationally. Both had quite different cultures, it's fair to say as well. But some similarities as well. And what that means now, if we look at the organisation, is the organisation is around 77,000 colleagues strong in totality now. So you can see how the organisation has delivered lots of synergies since 2008. We've got, in terms of the roles in the organisation, you know, we've got a very clear branch footprint across all our brands. We've got a huge diversity in terms of our leadership, our line managers and our colleagues, huge diversity of expertise from mobile van drivers driving mobile banks around some of our most remote locations, to our branches, to our investment banking arms, to what we do from an asset finance perspective. In terms of our people management capability, it's probably fair to say that we cover all ends of that spectrum in terms of capability. And as we start to talk about what we've done from a mediation and issue resolution perspective, you'll start to see how, you know, addressing some of those capability challenges and that diversity of skills and expertise has been critical to the achievements that we've been able to deliver so far. Separate grievance and harassment policies currently. So our harassment does include bullying. Our grievance policy still exists, though we are working incredibly hard to send it to the shredder really rather quickly, and hopefully are starting to win that battle. But I think, as Jane alluded to earlier with Royal Mail, you know, organisation our size, lots of control and governance around it, so change doesn't happen quite as quickly as we would like very often. Just in terms of our strategy, so our Chief Executive talks very publicly about his desire for the organisation to be best bank for customers and taking our community responsibilities very seriously, taking what we do in terms of helping return the UK economy to a level of prosperity is also critical for us. But to be able to do that, we've got to be able to create an environment that actually is the best bank for our colleagues at the same time. And again, what we're doing in terms of issue resolution really does sit with that aspiration. In terms of what we do as a function in HR, so we operate a very typically ULRIC model, business partners, centres of expertise, shared services, which is where my team, the HR advice and guidance team, come in. So we are there to support colleagues and line managers with HR policy advice, application of policy, etc. So, you can imagine if we look at discipline, grievance and harassment, there are far more of those cases than ideally anybody would like. So my team do support that. So we're based on 4 component parts in effect. One is our advice function. One is our case management function that we support the business through those challenges. One is the specialist support team whereby we provide specialist expertise and support to things like death in service, parenting, maternity policy, incredibly complex policy. So we support all of that. And last but not least, which is where one of April's team comes in, we have field-based consultants. And that's where we chose to develop our mediation expertise within our field team. So they are all HR professionals. They're all HR professionals who have day jobs in terms of managing and supporting complex case activity, so complexity through some of those real complex harassment situations, etc., and grievance too. So we've situated our mediation expertise very deliberately within those teams. Okay, so I'm going to hand over to April just to bring some of our journey to life for you. Do you want me to click?
You can click.
I can click.
Thank you. So when we started to look back in 2011, what are we going to do differently to try to find a different way to manage conflict in the organisation? As David said earlier, every organisation has conflict, and we knew that was there. We were seeing it coming through. So we started to look at what would our purpose be in doing that. And our primary driver has always been to improve the colleague experience when faced with conflict in the workplace. So that's what we've worked towards. We also, as Sue has said, we've got the desire to be the best bank for colleagues as well as the best bank for customers. So this fitted within that, and our experience was showing that in situations where there were formal investigations, colleagues weren't getting resolution at the end of that. So they go through a lengthy process and still not have resolution to the underlying issue. It wasn't rebuilding the working relationship to allow people to work together and move forward. That in turn was having an impact on absence. It was having an impact on productivity, not just for the people that were involved in the conflict, so it may be about 2 people, but actually that was having an impact on the wider team as well. So we started to look at what are the alternatives out there? What can we look at and do differently to try to find a way to resolve conflict earlier rather than it developing and becoming a bigger problem than it needed to be? So we decided at that point to go down the route of looking at mediation. We looked at it quite carefully for a little while, and then we decided that that was something that we wanted to introduce into Lloyd's Banking Group. So what did we do? Well, as in any organisation, we had to secure some funding to be able to put that in place. So we created a really compelling business case for that investment in training, and we got that approved. We then had to agree who would become our mediators, and Sue's talked through there why we went down the route that we did around its field consultants within the HR advice and guidance team. And we decided that we would train 12 initially, a bit like Jane, a little bit of finger in the air to be fair, but we decided that we would train 12 initially. And those field consultants had to apply to be a mediator, and from there we selected 12 to move forward with that. We also had to look at appointing a mediation training provider to train the consultants. And we looked quite extensively at different organisations, different companies who would do that for us. And we came down to 2, and we asked them to pitch to us. We selected TCM because the model of mediation that they were talking to us about was exactly what we needed. It was about getting people together, working through their differences, and coming out at the other end, being able to work together and move forward. We were also really, it was a passion and the commitment that TCM had as well. We were really enthusiastic about what it could do for Lloyd's Banking Group and for our colleagues. We incorporated mediation as an option in our policy, so we took our existing grievance and harassment policies and inserted a piece in there around mediation to try to encourage people to use mediation as an option for resolution. We then launched our mediation scheme. We called our mediation scheme at that stage Mediate First, and you'll hear how we've moved on from there in a later slide. And we also put in place some CPD activities for mediators and some supervision, because it was really key for us to see that our mediators would continue to maintain professional standards going forward. What did we learn? Well, we learned that mediation was very successful in resolving issues. As soon as we started to move into mediation, we very quickly moved to a success rate. So at mediation, coming out with a successful agreement, 85%. We're now well over 90% in that. Feedback from colleagues was really positive. So it started to become an integral part in how we manage conflict in the company. We discovered that changing culture is a challenge. Well, probably no real surprise there. It's not any different in a big multi-site organisation from any other company. Looking at the other side of things, we decided, as Jane had talked about earlier, we decided to do a soft launch as well. We wanted to make sure that our new mediators who had just been trained built their experience and built their confidence up to do the role. We didn't want to go out with the big bang and be inundated and have mediators who were perhaps not feeling confident. We decided a soft launch was right for us. What I will say is that doesn't help with the changing of a culture. It is much slower. So my advice would be if we could do it again, we probably would try to go a bit more big bang launch. So if you can do that, my advice would be do it. If it is right for your company, then do the soft launch, but be prepared that it's going to take longer to change that culture. We also realised that the CPD and supervision and mediators that we put in was absolutely vital. Again, back to something Jane said, not all mediators got a mediation straight away. It took some time to build it up because it was a soft launch. So we did webinars, which TCM led for us. We have a mediators forum, which continues today, where they could share experiences. We had buddying opportunities, co-mediating. Our mediators now all mediate individually, but they still take opportunities if they've not had a mediation for a while to go out with somebody else and co-mediate or buddy, give each other feedback. So that's been an ongoing theme for us. Line managers also go out, myself and my colleague Jackie, we go out and we also observe the mediations and give feedback, because people need to know what they're doing well as what their development areas are. We also realised that third-party mediation isn't enough in a large organisation, that resolving issues really does need to start with our managers. And where we got to, we were getting mediations through, or referrals for mediations through, which was great. The number of referrals that we got through to those that we actually got into a mediation environment, there was a gap. And it was because the way we were set up, the referrals were coming through too late to us. So we needed to find a way to get referrals through earlier, so before the position became too entrenched. So what have we done since then? Well, in 2014, we looked at a wider issue resolution strategy. So mediation became part of that wider issue resolution strategy. That encompasses local resolution, which is what we refer to where our managers are trying to resolve issues, third-party mediation, but also the formal investigation piece, because there are times where that is the right route to go. So we were trying to create this really holistic approach to resolving issues. Our strategy was very much based around resolving issues starts with managers locally. And as Sue alluded to, we had to look at the capability of our managers to do that. So we started to build some things to support managers to be able to do that. So we developed an intranet site that supports both managers and colleagues. Our intranet site's got two pathways, so depending if you're a colleague that's got a conflict situation or you're a manager that's supporting a colleague in a conflict situation. It gives guides around, for the colleague, how do you prepare for that conversation with your manager? What do you need to take to that? And encourage them to think about, what does resolution look like for you? The guide for the manager is around either having the conversation with the colleague when they've come to you with the issue. How are you going to take that forward? Are you going to get two colleagues in a room and facilitate a discussion? Or is it something that you've identified and want to deal with before it comes to you? And that's really the route that we are trying to take now. So the intranet site helps to support that. The other thing that we put in place as well was a triage service. So colleagues and line managers can call through and speak to a mediator when a conflict issue arises and get some advice around how to take that forward. The mediators will talk to the manager or the colleague about all the options, so that at the end of that they can make an informed choice around how to take it forward. There is a very heavy focus around trying to resolve it locally or through third-party mediation. And if a colleague does want to go down the formal harassment route and isn't prepared to listen to the other options, we will tell them what they won't get from that, and we'll tell them what they will get from mediation or local resolution. We also then developed an issue resolution workshop. It's a 4-hour face-to-face interactive workshop available to all line managers. It sits on our learning platform, so managers can elect to go on that workshop, become a participant. And that was again around, how do we build line manager capability so that they are dealing with issues rather than letting it. What we were seeing quite a lot of were issues that came to us and the manager said, I knew that was a problem. Why don't you deal with it when it became a problem rather than let it fester into this bigger piece that it didn't need to be? So our focus really is about managers developing the skills. The workshop helps them develop the skills to be able to manage that and to get the support from our mediators on the phone line or through the site to be able to do that as well. I've observed a couple of these workshops just in the last few weeks, and Harriet said a phrase in her session this morning. The phrase that's used most often by the guys that facilitate these workshops is nip it in the bud. All you hear is nip it in the bud, nip it in the bud. It's a thread all the way through the workshop. And it really, the feedback that we're getting through workshops is fantastic. We've just put on workshops right up until the end of this year, and they're already filling up very quickly. So spaces are going to be limited. By the end of this month, we're not going to have an awful lot of spaces left, and we're probably going to have to start thinking about, can we do more? And the final thing that we did to evolve was we introduced team issue resolution. So where we've got conflict in a team rather than just with individuals. So we sent some of our mediators along to TCM's Managing Team Conflicts workshop. And from there, David has helped us develop our team issue resolution framework. We're not going to have lots and lots of team issue resolutions, but we've had a number now where the outcomes are really positive. We are getting great feedback from the teams. We do follow-up calls afterwards to see how things have settled down, getting great feedback from that. And I think the real measure for me is that if you imagine the environment that we work in, so you've got a branch, and there's a conflict within that branch, and you suddenly say to a senior manager, well, actually, we can help you resolve that, but it means taking the 20 people out of that branch for a day. You can imagine the difficulties that creates, but our senior managers are prepared to do that to make it happen because they know that it will move things forward. So are we where we want to be? Do we think we've got a finished journey? Do we think we've got the finished issue resolution offering? No, we don't. We still have an awful lot to do around culture, improving the culture, developing the culture, improving awareness, improving capability within our managers. But we have, as Sue said, we have come a long way. We couldn't have done this without the team that do this, without the field team and the wider advice and guidance team. It is a real team effort, and they are so committed to what we're trying to do here because they see it on a day-to-day basis how much better it is for the colleagues that they support. We are hugely proud of the fact that out of the last 4 years, we've been mediation scheme of the year, from the Professional Mediators Association, from the National Mediation Awards, and we also won the inaugural Mediation Team of the Year last year as well. So we are extremely proud of what we've done so far. I hope that you found what we've had to say interesting. Hope you might take something away from that. Sue and I are very grateful for you sitting listening to us today. And if you have any questions, we're more than happy to take them. Thank you.
Are you able to say how much productivity has been regained versus the amount you've spent on training your 12 mediators and setting up all these workshops? That's quite an outlay. Are you seeing a return coming in terms of less time off work, better morale in the workplace, more motivation?
Certainly in terms of morale, yes. We've not explicitly measured against improving absence rates or performance necessarily. We've done some work around what the commercial benefits have been. So we're saving millions by virtue of the fact, even if you just make the simple comparison of a mediation to your point earlier about a grievance that will take 6 months and longer. And in that context, we can, demonstrate that financial saving for the organisation.
So with some employers, that will be the killer question.
Well, it is, yeah, and we've estimated that quite conservatively so far. We've more to do in terms of proving the case across a range of measures, but certainly that tangible saving against grievance is compelling enough in itself almost.
And we're resolving on our triage line, 85% of the calls that come through our triage line are resolved either locally or through mediation. And we've actually reduced our formal harassment investigations by about 50%.
Hi.
You mentioned that there's a tipping point where you talk to your colleagues about whether they'd like to go down the mediation route or follow one of the more prescriptive policies, grievance, harassment, those sorts of things. Do you have an internal measure where mediation just not going to cut it if you get complaint past a certain point? A level of seriousness where even if mediation do work, you've still got an issue anyway. So, sexual harassment, racial harassment, those sorts of things, I'm sure that mediation may well work, but the fact that it's been reported and happened means you've got an issue anyway.
Yeah. And in those examples, absolutely, that tipping point tips it into that level of severity means we need to really think carefully about the harassment or grievance route, dependent on what the prevailing issue is at that time. So.
Not to go down the mediation route. So once you've sort of said, right, it's tipped in, so I'm sure that people can be talked to at a later date, but the more outstanding issue is the risk to the business because you have a complaint for such a seriousness.
And where you've got that risk and where you've got that potential reputational damage, absolutely, we take that formal stance. And if there are some underlying issues around relationships that it's appropriate to think about mediation for, we'll consider the answer to that question. But yeah, where it's risk, where it's reputational, where there are some real challenging issues, then,
And that's the situation on the triage line where our team are experienced enough, they will make that call. They won't push down an informal or a mediation route if they feel it's not appropriate.
Hi.
I guess just leading on from that, at the back end of the formal process, appropriate going forward for both parties?
On a needs basis, we would. So if the individual that's investigated that complaint deems that actually at the end of that process there is a place for mediation, we'll explore that with the business just to understand the feasibility of doing that. Doesn't happen often, if I'm honest, that is seen as an outcome, because actually, albeit we've talked about a soft launch, there will be still pockets of our business that don't understand mediation and won't necessarily see it even as an option to be explored. So, but it is there as a possibility, yeah.
And I suppose our experience of when there has been a recommendation of considering mediation, the situation you've then got is you've got a winner and a loser because there's been an outcome. So trying to get two people, one who's won and one who's lost, to then come together and agree to compromise in some way is quite difficult. So what we've found that after the formal investigation, although we've not done a huge number of them, they are less successful at reaching an agreement at mediation than if it's done at the early stages.
So you referenced the Ulrich model, and I was interested to hear you referencing that, because my experience of conflict or sort of requirements of managers to manage these situations is the inability of managers to manage conflict actually impedes the ability to integrate a full Ulrich model as we sort of Ulrich light variations. I'm just interested to know, introducing a mediation program within Lloyd's, do you think in some way it's assisted the full implementation of the full Ulrich model, whereby your managers and leaders can actually now start to work with you and manage some of the transactional and HR responsibilities that are cascaded to that?
It's an enabler, David. We're still a long way to go, because the changing dynamic of the organisation means that that changing capability, it's an ever-moving feast. So we think we get there and almost the goalposts move again. But it's certainly an enabler, caveated with still a lot to do. Okay.
Fantastic.
Right.
Thank you so much again.
Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you.